I'd like to introduce to you Archbishop George Leo Thomas. In 1986, actually, I should say, he is the first Archbishop of Las Vegas. In 1986, Archbishop Thomas received his PhD from the University of Washington, writing a dissertation entitled Catholics and the Missions of the Pacific Northwest, for which he received the university's Gordon C. Lee Award for the Distinguished Dissertation of 1986. In 2000, the then Father Thomas was appointed Auxiliary Bishop of the Archdiocese of Seattle by Pope John Paul II, serving until his transfer to the Diocese of Helena in 2004. And in 2018, Pope Francis named Bishop Thomas as the Bishop of the Diocese of Las Vegas. He continues to serve on numerous boards and committees, including the USCCB Subcommittee on Healthcare, the Vatican's Treasures of History Foundation, the Equestrian Order of the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem, and the Knights of Columbus and the Knights of Peter Clever. And as I mentioned more recently, on May 30th, 2023, he was named as the first Archbishop of the newly created Archdiocese of Las Vegas. So please join me in expressing our thanks to our Episcopal hosts for this summit.
Well, a very warm welcome to all of you as you join us in the Archdiocese of Las Vegas. Some 750,000 visitors come to Las Vegas every week. They come here to pray at their slot machines. I was appointed Bishop of Las Vegas 6 years ago, having been in Helena as well as Seattle. And when the nuncio called me about transferring from Montana to here, first of all, I only knew two people. My cousin, who was an FBI agent here, in charge of government corruption, and Bishop Pepe. But the nuncio told me that day that Las Vegas had grown too complex to send a new bishop, and asked me if I would leave Helena. So I asked him, well, what are the complexities? And he said, well, first of all, it's exponential growth. And then a paucity of incarnated clergy, the need to build new schools and parishes, the need to strengthen the diocesan infrastructure, and then, and by the way, you need to adjudicate a $32 million construction lawsuit. Well, that morning that I arrived here, Father Stokig and I went out on a grand tour, and he took me down to that iconic Welcome to Las Vegas sign that's down on the South Strip, and I stood beneath the picture. I had my photo taken, then I sent it back to Helena with a caption. The caption read, Pope gambles big in Las Vegas. Everything that the nuncio described that day was true, but I've been blown away most especially by the vitality and dynamism of this local church. We presently have 7 building or expansion projects underway. I've had the blessing of dedicating 2 new schools. 2 of our parishes now have 10,000 registered families, 40,000 parishioners apiece, 9 masses standing room only. The St. Anne Parish baptizes 30 babies a week, 1,220 First Communions. We're building a new Newman Center within a couple years on the campus of UNLV, and our confirmation classes have been just simply enormous. There is a beautiful symbiosis between the clergy and the laity here that has really made the dynamism take off like a fire. I feel so blessed to be here and very humbled to be asked to be able to address you today with these few reflections. Special shout out to Father Ricky and Sister Nancy for bringing such a salient topic to fruition, especially at this time in our shared history. To set the stage for the conference, I'd like to offer a handful of what I would describe as my humble observations on polarization, reconciliation, and healing, drawn from now 48 years of service as a priest and bishop. The first thing I would like to say is a word of encouragement and even empowerment. I was a newly ordained priest appointed by Archbishop Hunthausen to serve at St. James Cathedral in the heart of downtown Seattle. I lived there with 7 other priests, and as newly ordained, I was at the bottom of the clerical food chain for a number of years. Each of us was given a special assignment in addition to parish work. I happened to be given night chaplaincy for the King County Jail. There were 1,500 inmates, felons and misdemeanors there. Among the most notorious of criminals that I had ever seen at the King County Jail was a defendant by the name of Gary Ridgway, someone that you probably wouldn't know by his name, but rather by his moniker, the Green River Killer. He had been convicted of the serial killings of 49 women and presumed responsible for the deaths of many, many more. On December 2003, he was sentenced in King County courtroom for these crimes. On that day of reckoning, the courtroom was filled with people, newspaper reporters, national media, most especially an overflow crowd of family members of the victims. The atmosphere in that courtroom was literally explosive. They brought the defendant in with a cadre of armed guards, and then Judge Jones addressed the defendant. He described him as a calculating emissary of death, and then he ordered him to turn and face the people. As he did so, the families of the victims whose lives he had shattered had a chance to come up and address Gary Ridgway directly. Judge Jones had very difficult things to say in his introductory remarks, but then when the people spoke, literally a torrent of uncontrolled anger was unleashed in that courtroom. Ridgway was called an animal and a demon and a coward and a parasite and the personification of evil, and all kinds of descriptors too graphic for a pulpit or an ambo. The words for a jail chaplain to hear were very sad and very searing. And then the unexpected happened in that courtroom. There was a man named Robert Rule. He stepped up to the microphone to offer his statement. His own teenage daughter, Linda, had been a victim of this brutal killing. Mr. Rule spoke calmly and eloquently as he loved his daughter so very deeply. And this is what he said. Mr. Ridgway, there are people here who hate you. I am not one of them. I forgive you. I forgive you for what you've done. You've made it difficult for me to live up to what I believe, what God said we must do, and that is, Mr. Ridgway, to forgive. But God didn't say to forgive just certain people. He said forgive all. And so, Mr. Ridgway, I say to you, you are forgiven. The raucous King County courtroom fell into a stunned silence. The tone of the hearing shifted, and the decibel level fell. A grieving father rose as an eloquent witness to the power of mercy and forgiveness, and single-handedly he countered a torrent of fury. He did on that day what few of us could ever do apart from a major miracle. For a moment, as Rule spoke his words, I noticed that a tear appeared in the corner of Ridgway's eyes that he wiped away very quickly. To paraphrase the words of William Shakespeare on that day in a King County courtroom, the quality of mercy fell like gentle rain from heaven. It was twice blessed. It blessed Mr. Rule, and it blessed everyone who heard. It was, from the vantage of a parish priest, an indescribable moment and a powerful testimony to the efficacy of the gospel, proof positive that the gospel of Jesus, well lived, with courage and conviction, can make a difference in the world, even when the odds are against us and the battle is all uphill. And so my first takeaway today from the early years in my priesthood is be encouraged. the gospel makes a difference. The second, a point I'd make comes from a very brief paragraph in the writings of Father Ron Rolheiser, OMI. He was addressing the so-called functional family. And in his thesis, he said, there's no such thing as a truly functional family. Each of us comes from families that are scarred and wounded. However, many of us also come from a generation where there were TV versions of idealized families. I look back at my own early days with Leave It to Beaver and My Three Sons and Ozzie and Harriet and Father Knows Best. And we saw these depictions on TV and thought, wow, my family's really messed up, and I wish I had one of those. We know from experience now that every family is wounded and every heart broken. And so it causes us to reimagine what a truly functional family is. The truly functional family, redefined, is one in which functions gradually outweigh dysfunctions. Functions that are embedded in the teaching of the gospel: love and understanding, compassion and mercy, goodness and forgiveness, helpfulness and encouragement. Down through the years, I must confess that I've applied this simple thesis also in the places that I have lived and labored, in parishes and in the dioceses. And I will tell you, it has made all the difference. I propose that the function of leadership is to introduce this model of the gospel and to mentor compassionate living, leading with love and with empathy, a simple model that I will tell you is empowering and transformational. It's my second takeaway from priestly ministry. Number 3, for 17 years, I served as Vicar General in the Archdiocese of Seattle. Those early years were highly volatile, deeply divided, and seriously polarized. My first years of administration followed the Vatican's intervention in Seattle, and my very first early and temporary appointment was to serve as the secretary for now retired Cardinal Donald Wuerl. I was eventually appointed auxiliary bishop many, many years later. That Bishop Wuerl model was dismantled after only 18 months, and the Archdiocese received a coadjutor archbishop. I watched Archbishop Hunthausen and Archbishop Murphy struggle to make the model work and to navigate during very turbulent waters. And I learned a lot from them during those rather tumultuous years. The first thing I would say, or the first observation, was as I watched both archbishops working among the people, I noted their pastoral style, what they did and what they did not do when the going got rough. I tell new bishops, when you are first introduced to your diocese and you start to deal with conflict, make sure you have embroidered in your mitre 4 letters, DTTB. Don't take the bait. When you're standing out greeting the people and you see a little delegation standing over there on your right or on your left, it usually portends trouble. Don't take the bait. Secondly, Archbishop Hunthausen taught us always to prefer dialogue over diatribe, invitation over invective, accompaniment over alienation, and persuasion over polemic. The second thing that he taught us from his personal life still moves me to this day. When I go to visit him in Helena, where he retired, I would go to his nursing facility, and he would be seated in a quiet room, and it was always the same. I would say to him, Archbishop, what are you doing? His answer still moves my heart. He would say, I'm just sitting here letting God love me. In 1999, Cardinal Hume, who was at that time the Archbishop of Westminster, gave a beautiful talk to the bishops, and I was brand new. And he said in his address, "I believe that unity in the church in the next millennium will be dependent on a very essential element, and that is the spirituality in the lives of the leaders." And I think both Archbishop Hunthausen and Archbishop Murphy, and in due season, Archbishop Burnett, taught that precious lesson as they led a local church through tumultuous times. In a word, when the going gets tough, their legacy that I take away and hand on to you is don't forget to keep the eyes of your heart ever fixed on Jesus. The fourth point I make comes from the Council, Second Vatican Council. There is a job description for bishops that is always taken out of the Council documents, and I find it to be woefully incomplete. It is incomplete for a number of reasons. The Fathers of the Council underscored the importance of the bishop being, and I quote, "the guardian of unity in the local church." But the description is inadequate because there is another line that comes from Gaudium et Spes that I think completes the job description necessarily. The bishop is to be the guardian of unity and I put big underlines on this one, and the guarantor of lawful diversity, right out of the Council documents. The guarantor. Thomas J. Murphy had such a great way about him. He was so Irish and right out of Chicago. And he said, "Don't forget the church is like a great bush in which cardinals, crows, and cuckoos roost together." James Joyce said the same thing more poetically. He just said, "Here comes everybody." Church leaders must work assiduously to ensure the unity of the church is maintained and the beautiful diversity of the church is celebrated. Never confusing unity with uniformity, said so powerfully earlier. And to always open the church to the varied ways of living out the Catholic faith, the multifarious customs and expressions of prayer and praise we find in our people. The concluding part of Gaudium et Spes says, "Let there be unity in what's necessary, freedom in what is unsettled, and charity in any case." I think that that is another antidote to polarization in the church. Number 5 comes from the example and the legacy, the living legacy of Francis. During his Holy Thursday visits to the Castel del Marmo, we find Catholic social teaching in action. On Holy Thursday, he washes and kisses the feet of young inmates, male and female, Christian and Muslim, in a profound act of humility and affection. His example is a declaration that says profoundly, there are to be no throwaway people, no disposable souls, no discarded lives, no second-class citizens, no sobrantes, that is, no castaways, no exceptions. I'd say that he is a living homily on servant leadership, giving flesh and bones to the words attributed to Augustine. If you look deeply enough into the eyes of any person, there you'll see something that is divine. Catholic social teaching, taught well and lived out well, is a recipe for the reduction of polarization. It's founded on a vision, of course, that every person, without exception, is fashioned in the image and likeness of God, and enjoins us to soar like eagles above partisan politics and help others in the midst of very difficult and conflicting issues that we struggle with daily, to soar like eagles, always again with our eyes on the Lord Jesus. Number 6. Council Fathers also wrote, now we're addressing bishops again here, but this applies to leadership in general. The bishops are not intended by Christ to shoulder alone the saving work of the church. the Council Fathers introduced a new vocabulary: collaboration, consultation, collegiality, cooperation. And Pope Benedict even raised the ante by saying the laity are co-missioned with the ordained. The underlying message from the Church Fathers is the wise pastor must also know what he doesn't know, and to gather experienced, wise women and men around a common table, garnering their wisdom, utilizing their experience, and most especially seeking their assistance in managing the temporal and the complex affairs of the Church. Shared responsibility is another major theme from the Council and a major antidote for division in the ranks of the Church. And lastly, there's still another important principle of governance that's rooted in the ancient Church. Quod omnem tangit, ob omnibus tractare debit. What affects all should be discussed by all. The core value of synodality. Participation, active listening, respectful engagement are keys to building a synodal church and still a lasting pathway for reducing polarization and division in the church we love so deeply. Today, and in the hours that follow, you're on an important journey. I quote from the letter that Father Ricky sent to me: bridging the divide and seeking reconciliation. The stated goal: to confront the toxic polarization that hampers our collective spiritual, emotional, and physical well-being. Through sharing stories, engaging in dialogue, and listening to one another with empathy, we forge new paths for reconciliation and unity. May your time be a time of grace and blessing and healing, and may you keep the eyes of your heart fixed on Him who is ever in our midst as one who serves. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, Archbishop. Just to let you know, when we were looking at various dioceses, I think we came down to like 3. And Las Vegas came up at the top for 3 reasons. The first was that we knew that it was what Father Tom mentioned in one of our meetings, that that Nevada is a red-blue state. so that would be a perfect, a setting for this. The second reason was that we also had to have it in the West Coast. And the third reason is that I knew you, and I knew that you would be a welcoming spirit. And so thank you for your hospitality.